We're starting this video back beside our compost bins and washing station because I've got an idea for these two areas that I think could help make the work around here flow a little more smoothly. For the most part, the tasks that I perform here are pretty straightforward and can be accomplished without any fancy machinery, but there are a couple of steps in particular that I think would really benefit from the help of some kind of rotating drum. Allow me to explain. At our washing table, I've been using these porous crates to wash all of our root vegetables. I'll dump small portions of dirty root vegetables in here, stir them around with one hand and spray them with the other. And in time, the dirt and debris will wash through the holes here onto the table and get collected down below. And the water will get pumped out to our fruit trees and stuff beside here. And this process has been working, but the slowest part of this is stirring the crop with my hand or shaking the bin here to rotate the carrots or whatever crop I'm washing to get a better angle. I think things would be a lot faster if I just had some kind of rotating drum that automatically stirred up the crop. Then I could just spray into the drum, or even have an automated sprayer that would do everything for me. Then I could simply dump the dirty crop into the barrel, let it get sprayed and rotated by itself, and then dump the clean crop out. That would be dreamy. This isn't an idea I've invented by any means. There are large-scale barrel washers used in the market gardening industry. I would just like to replicate something like that on a smaller scale. When it comes time to empty out some of our compost bin, I find myself wanting to screen some of the compost. This might be just to get out larger debris before I apply it to our garden beds. Or it might be to use finer 1/4-inch screen like this to filter out a really nice fine compost mix before using the compost in our indoor seed starting. But whether I'm using 1/2-inch screen or 1/4-inch screen like this, the task involves scooping out large quantities of compost and slowly spreading them over the screen, which is a really time-consuming process. But if I just had metal hardware cloth like this mounted inside a rotating drum, then I could just simply shovel the compost into that drum and the screened product would drop down below without any additional stirring on top of the screen. That sounds a lot better than this setup. And that's why I got excited when I came across this secondhand concrete mixer in pretty clean shape. I thought this could potentially serve as a great starting point for our rotation machine. This drum will give us a nice, simple rotating action. And now all we need to do is figure out a way to mount two different styles of drums on the face here to serve both the purpose of washing our root vegetables and also screening our compost. I don't know exactly how this is going to pan out yet, but I've got a few sketches prepared and I've collected a few materials, and now it's just time to start building so I can figure out some of the finer details. And I'm going to take you along with me throughout the process, starting with the root washer. The next few days included a bunch of grinding, bending, figuring, and fine-tuning. But thanks to the magic of video, we can jump right to the finished product now so you can see what we ended up with after all that. So this is the finished product in its root washer form. I'm going to take a few minutes now to walk you through the build process and tell you the story of how this came together so you understand the purpose of everything, and we'll do a demonstration of how it works as well, because I'm proud to say it does work wonderfully. Now, it would be relatively simple to just throw a bunch of carrots in the cement mixer, add water, mix it up, drain the whole bit, but every example of a root washer that uses a cement mixer that I've seen just spills the water all over the ground. Same with the larger barrel washers that I've seen larger market gardeners using. And I have learned from experience using our washing station that I really prefer to have dry feet and not be working in a sloppy mess when I'm washing my vegetable crops. So one of my priorities in building this root washer was to be able to contain the water that I use for washing and divert it away somehow. My solution for creating a mess-free root washer was to have an inner washing drum in which the vegetables would be churning and sprayed, and then that spray would somehow drain into an outer vessel which would catch the water and divert it elsewhere. So that's why I'm not just using the original drum here. I've inserted another barrel into that larger drum. And I wanted to make sure that this inner drum was as large as possible. This is a 32-gallon Rubbermaid waste bin. So first off, I needed to make an alteration to the mouth of the machine here. You can see that there's a cut line near the top of the cement mixer here. We actually removed the top few inches, and the reason for that was initially I only had 16 inches diameter here to work with, and that would force me to use a pretty small washing barrel. So by increasing the diameter here, I was able to upgrade my washing barrel size, which I'm assuming would increase the capacity of the machine as well. So I thought that was a good initial step. As you can see, the top of the cement mixer flares out, so it was important for me to match the diameter of this cut with the diameter of the the bin here. So I just wrapped a piece of string around the bin and copied that same circumference onto the cement mixer before making the cut with a regular skill saw fitted with a metal blade. And that worked pretty well. As soon as the cut was made, I did a test fit of the bin and was pleased to see that it fit all right. But I noticed that I couldn't friction fit the bin as soon as I started to spin the mixer. As much as I tried to put the bin in the right spot, there was inevitably some wobble. So I decided to actually screw in the bin in 4 locations as well, just with a short piece of metal strapping and some small bolts. Oh, and before I was able to slide the drum into the cement mixer, I had to remove these mixing blades that were bolted into the inside chamber there. That was a pretty straightforward job. So there's the process for getting the drum inside the cement mixer. After that point, I knew then where the water had to exit the drum. I don't want water coming out of the drum up here in this zone. I want the water to be exiting my washing chamber down here within the cement mixer so that it's contained. Because remember, I want to have a dry washing area. I want to direct this water away. If you come in close here, you can see the holes that I made. These are all the drain holes for the washing chamber, and they only start at the halfway point here, so they're all contained within the outer cement mixer. And then once that water makes it into the cement mixer, we need a way for that water to escape. And these holes can be much larger. These are 1 inch by 2 inch holes that I just cut with an angle grinder and a metal cutoff blade. That was pretty crude work, but I think we got the job done here. These holes are located near the base of the cement mixer because, again, we want to focus on capturing all this water. So if you come around the back here, when the cement mixer is turning, all of these holes direct the water into this collection trough. This is just a 24-inch planter box. Pretty easy to find something like this. Connected to the crossbar here with 2 U-bolts. I fitted the planter box with a shower drain so that we had a large opening here for any larger debris to escape cleanly down through the bottom. And we've just got a large flexible hose. Often you'll see something like this attached to a rain barrel as the overflow hose. And then thanks to my small effort in collecting the wash water here, I could roll this washing drum near any plant that I want to irrigate, fruit trees, shrubs, perennial beds, and I'm putting the water immediately to good use. One of the finer details in making that work is that I need to make sure that the cement mixer is at the right angle. If I were to operate it running straight up vertically like this, then the water is obviously going to be spewing out in all directions. So when I'm washing, I just have to make sure that the angle's right there. I've got a couple options to work with here that will all work to collect the water behind it. After I got all the drum stuff sorted out, the next challenge was to get water spraying in there somehow. So I could stand here with a nozzle, hook it up to a hose and just stand here, but that kind of defeats the whole purpose of these things, right? I want this machine to save me time. I want it to free me for other tasks. And if all it does is rotate my vegetables and I still have to stand here, then I think there's a lot of investment for not a lot of gain. So instead of me holding a nozzle right here, I just bent a piece of conduit. This is my first attempt, so this one didn't make the cut, but I've got another one here that's now fastened onto the supporting bar behind the cement mixer here. Just fastened it on with a couple of hose clamps. So it follows the supporting arm behind the cement mixer and then up and over the right side. It was a tricky shape to bend, but after some patient attempts, I was able to get a shape that works for this application. The conduit is stiff enough to support a lightweight hose. It's not bending in any way, and it doesn't give me any indication that it's going to be falling off anytime soon. So I'm happy with this. Initially, I thought this supporting conduit would make the most sense if it was just coming up over the top, but I realized that I couldn't flip this mixing chamber over to the other side if that pipe was on the top. It would hit that crossbar down below. So just a simple adjustment to the location of this supporting conduit just over to the right here made everything possible, and it still gives me a perfectly adequate angle for spraying into the washing drum. I've fastened a pressure washer wand to this conduit, and then I'm going to add 2 elements to give me a little bit more control. One is a shutoff valve for pressure washers. This shutoff valve is like the trigger on a spray nozzle, except I don't have to hold it all the time. So the nice thing about this is now it's in an off position. I can turn it on, and then the spray is continuous. I don't have to touch it, right? That's the goal. I want this to work without me touching it. And then I want to direct this water down the wand and into the bin. So I've got a little bendy arm here. You can find these attachments online pretty easily. And this angle is definitely not ideal. So to allow me some adjustability here as well, picked up this what do you call this? This is a doodad that allows me to change the angle of the nozzle 360 degrees. So I insert that as my final point of adjustment. And lastly, I have a tip here that spreads out my spray across an angle of 40 degrees. So it gives me great coverage inside the bin. If you're wondering why I bother with a pressure washer instead of just a regular spray nozzle and household water pressure, it's because after the first few years of washing vegetables by hand, I realized that using pressurized water greatly reduced the amount of water that I needed for washing my root vegetables. It got them cleaner, used less water, pretty big pluses there in my books. So the pressure washer that we use today is an older model. It's just this little guy here that only runs up to 1300 psi. A lot of newer pressure washers will be much higher than this, but this is really all we need. I've damaged vegetables with higher pressures. That's a comfortable level of pressure for all of our hard-skinned vegetables like carrots, parsnips, beets, potatoes. So now, I promised you I'd fire it up right away, so let's do that. I still use this pressure washer nozzle at our washing station for cleaning out bins, so I'd like to keep it intact. I'm just going to insert the quick release fitting here. And to hold down the trigger, I'm just going to put a clamp on the outside. Now we're ready to go. There it is. There's not much more to explain about that now that we've seen it, but obviously at this point we were really excited to try it out. So the girls and I went over to the kitchen garden beds where Arla had some carrots planted. We dug up all of her carrots and dumped them into the machine to see how this would work. We set the angle just right and turned the machine on, and sure enough, within a couple of seconds, we started to see some really noticeable changes in the cleanliness of the carrots. And before long, we were able to just dump out the bin of carrots into a stack of bins in front of the root washer. And judging by how clean these carrots are, it's clear to see that the machine works. I did have a concern though that maybe the pressurized water would be too much for potatoes. Some potatoes have a tendency to lose some of their skin if I'm not careful during the washing process. So to test this out, we harvested some Belanita fingerling potatoes as well. We still threw them straight into the machine, skipped the curing process, so the skins would have been soft. And I was really pleased to see that the skins didn't just peel right off entirely. The spray is really nicely distributed, as you can see here. And then when we dumped those potatoes out, they were just as clean as the carrots and no signs of any damage. So two really great test runs with the machine have proven it to be pretty effective, and I'm really excited to apply it to the hundreds of pounds that we're going to be harvesting later on. We're going to leave the washing process here and move on to the next task shortly, but before I do that, I want to comment on a couple of things that could be a little bit better about this machine. You can see in the bottom that there's a bit of a protruding form along the base of this drum, and that has a tendency, especially this part here, the rectangular portion at the bottom and the top, that has a tendency to catch the vegetables as it's spinning around, and it ends up carrying them all the way to the top and then dropping them suddenly, as opposed to having this just even roll. So if I were to pick a new trash can, again, I would look for something that didn't have these protrusions here so that I get more of a smooth churning action. These channels along the sides have a similar effect. They tend to allow the vegetables to settle into the channel and then carry them up a little higher than they would have otherwise. But I think that amount of agitation is actually effective in helping prevent the root vegetables from just sliding along the surface. It actually helps them flip over more than they would otherwise. At first I was disappointed with the location of the spray nozzle to the side here because I realized these quick release fittings don't hold their position. You can see it dangles back to the side there. So I debated taping this or mounting it more permanently, but then I lose my quick release action, and I like this a lot because I want to free up this space for the next purpose that we're going to be talking about in a second. But I was pleased to learn that as soon as the pressure starts to flow through this arm here, it remains fixed in place. So we're lucky there, and it ends up working on the side here just as well as it would have worked on the top. Okay, so that's all there is to the washing drum. I think probably missed something, but those are the basics. The next purpose I wanted this drum to serve was to somehow screen compost. So that's another task that would be really well aided by something that could rotate. At first I thought I was going to remove this top half of the cement mixer entirely and bolt on a new mounting plate and a large rain barrel on top and put holes in that and have it rotate all on top of here. But it turns out this top half of the cement mixer wasn't easy to remove at all, and I didn't want to risk damaging it. So I bolted it back together and I went for a bike ride actually. I thought I was going to give up, but over the course of my bike ride I came up with a better idea, and I realized that compost, when screened, actually can flow like water. So I could get it to flow through the same path as the water flows right now. It could go into the rotating drum at the top, be sifted through some metal hardware cloth into the larger outer drum, and then out these same holes that the water flows through as well. So I didn't need that whole extra ensemble and the huge mounting plate and everything. I could keep it simpler, and I love simpler, even though this machine is getting a little bit complex. All right, let's talk about how we make the switch here. So now we don't need this extension for the compost screening, so we'll take that off. We don't need the water here, so we'll take that off. Shut-off valve is going to get in the way, so we'll take that off. Now, we need to switch out the drum. We had 3/8-inch holes here that were sufficient for draining all the water, but this is not enough to screen compost, obviously. What we need for screening compost is this. So I introduced to you drum number 2, which is our compost screening drum, fitted with 1/2-inch hardware cloth. And just like this original barrel for the washing drum, I fitted the hardware cloth on the lower portion to make sure that it's fully contained inside the cement mixer, because I want to catch all of that screened compost, run it through these holes, and catch it in a bin so it's not just spewed out all over the ground. That is the goal. So let's take a second to swap out these bins. I need my drill. Other side. Okay, that bin's coming out. New bin's going in. So there's the switchover process. I wish it was quicker, but to be honest, I'm not going to do this very often, maybe once or twice a year. So to take 2 minutes once or twice a year I don't think is too much of a sacrifice, but maybe I can get something that releases a little quicker for those attachment points there. Anyways, now with our drum mounted, you can see that there's actually quite a bit of space on the outside of this metal screen where that sifted compost can slide down the cement mixer and out the holes at the back. So we're going to do a little demo now to show that. But before we do, I'll share a dilemma that I had with this dual purpose machine. With the first segment here, I showed you how we had this nice water catchment device. This is obviously not going to work for screened compost. I can't get compost to land in this planter box and then flow through this hose and out into my garden. Unfortunately, that would be awesome. Thankfully, one of the built-in features that I love so much about this cement mixer is that it can rotate to both directions. So for our second purpose, for our compost screening, we're going to flip the bin over to the other side. And this is why it was so important to have that spray nozzle mounted on the side. Now we can get a full range of motion on the other side, and the holes that we cut to drain water are now on the other side as well. So if we put a bin underneath this side, we should get our screened compost going into that bin. So let's do that. And then we'll go grab some unscreened compost and put this to the test. So follow me. Okay, well, we've got the monkeys in the background. I'll explain that this is our 3-bin composting system that I teach in the Seed to Table program, so you'll find this in Module 8. We go over the details of how we load these bins and how we operate everything without ever turning this compost pile. This is our active bin right now. The far chamber is where we're collecting cover materials, and this bin is our finished compost that's just been sitting here for the last year. I've never turned it. It's just waiting to be released. So digging into this pile is going to be the first time it's ever been dug into. I pulled a bit of this out yesterday to make sure my machine worked, but we'll continue on digging this hole right now. So come on in and have a look.
Okay.
Right here. So on the top things look a little bit rough. That's because before I let a compost bin sit to finish, I just put a generous topping of straw and it dries, but everything else underneath is composting wonderfully. So this is our finished compost.
Orange pea.
Good finished compost should always smell wonderful, so have a whiff of that. Good stuff. We've got some eggshells on the top. They never really disappear. And there are a few other larger chunks, but we'll get rid of those in a second. Yeah, you can have a smell. Smell? How does that smell? Fresh? Like you want to eat it?
No.
You don't want to eat it?
No.
But don't you like eating carrots with dirt on them?
Not
You don't like washing your carrots. I thought you'd like eating this dirty compost.
just normal dirt. Not.
But is it stinky?
It doesn't stink here at all. It smells like fresh soil. If there was too much water or not enough oxygen in this pile right now, we'd have a really sour smell. It would be awful to handle.
Spider.
There's plastic wrapper. We'll screen that out. If it was too dry in here, we wouldn't get any compost at all. It'd just be dried grass, dried chunks of vegetables. There wouldn't have been any decomposition. But our method of building these piles allows for balanced composition within the pile. And so we don't have to turn, we don't have to add water. We just wait for the decomposition to take place, and we can come back here after a period of time and dig out the finished compost. It's easy. We're just smart about building the pile. Anyways, there's our compost. Let's take this back to the compost screening machine and give it a try. You could have rides, but your bums would get so dirty.
Yeah.
The plan here is for the screened compost to end in this bucket and our giant chunks to be dumped out on this side. So that's why we've got the 2 buckets here. Are you going to shovel it in? You could if you want. I'll get the angle up here so it stays in there, and we'll turn it on. You can get a couple loads in there before we start it. Okay, we just adjusted things there for better lighting, for your viewing pleasure, and we're slowly loading this machine with our very strong muscles. Okay, great. We got some in there though. We should turn it on. You want to flip it on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, here.
Change the angle a little bit here. Turn it on a little bit, get it out. There's a look at how the screening works. Let's have a look at the two end products. We've got some pretty big chunks here. So this is everything that didn't pass through the 1/2-inch screen. I'm certainly glad this stuff is not going into our soil blocks. That would ruin the process for soil block making. Our product on the other side is this finely textured finished compost. That's wonderful. There are a few bits of larger debris in here. Well, not really much. Like this is one of the larger elements. This would still run through our soil blocks pretty easily without wrecking things. So I'd be comfortable using this stuff in our soil blocks for seed starting. Would I want to screen all of our compost to this degree for use on our field beds? Probably not. I don't mind if there's a couple of larger twigs in that compost. It ends up raking into the pathways pretty quickly anyways. But I do want to screen all of our seed starting compost, and this will work for that. During the screening process, you would have seen quite a bit of compost blasting out these holes. And it was pretty well contained by this guard. This is just one of the cutouts from the drum here. Before adding this, a lot of the compost was getting picked up and just flung off to the side, so this really prevents that. And only a small quantity of the compost missed the bucket here. Maybe I'll get a larger bucket or get better at that, but pretty happy with the percentage of finished compost that ended up in the spot where we wanted it. So that gives you a pretty detailed look at how our dual purpose root washer / compost screening machine works. If I could change anything about this setup right now, I would spend a little bit more and order colored barrels so it had a bit more of a fun feel instead of this gray stuff that just reminds me of garbage all the time. And one adjustment I might make in the future would be to lower the RPMs, or the speed of rotation of the drum. Currently it's running at 35 RPM, and I tried running the power to this device through a dimmer switch. Didn't make much of a difference to the speed. I got a motor speed controller that you'd use for a router. That didn't work either. So clearly the motor can't be affected too much by simple controllers like that. What I could do to change the speed here is increase the pulley size on the top from a 10-inch diameter to a 14-inch diameter. That's probably what I would end up doing. That would lower my RPMs here to the 20-25 RPM range, which I think would be more comfortable for mixing fragile crops like our crispiest carrots and avoid having them snap on me. That didn't seem to be a problem with the first crop here, but if I do notice carrots breaking as they're being spun around in this mixing drum, then I'll get right on lowering the RPM here. That should be a pretty simple task, but I will need to make a larger housing for that purpose. But based on our first trials, things are working pretty well, so overall I'm just excited to get started using this machine on a permanent basis. What I really love about this machine is that it's got two purposes. Most of the machines that I acquire can just do one thing. Maybe they can do it really well, but still just do one thing. My threshing machine just threshes. My rotor tiller just rotor tills. This can screen compost and wash root vegetables. That's awesome. Anytime I acquire something into my collection of tools, I want to make sure that it's got a lot of value, because it's really easy to acquire things in this world today. And if I just fill my garage with clutter, it's going to slow me down. It's going to make me have to look for things more often. It's going to require me to have more storage space. That clutter comes with a cost. My approach to growing food for our family is to still do a lot of things by hand, because there are a lot of tasks that I can do really effectively by hand. But sometimes, like in these instances, when I want to wash a ton of vegetables or screen a ton of compost, it really does help to have a little bit of machine power to greatly accelerate the process. More and more, I'm sticking to electrified devices like this one. So I love that it's powered by electricity. See, we've got 12 panels pumping out electricity for us on our house right there, and another 12 on our garage in the back. So anytime I plug in a device like this, I know I'm just pulling the energy from the sun anyways. It's a really good emission-free way for us to accomplish a mechanized task in our growing operation. Now, if you're the type of person that likes to put this kind of thought into the actions you're taking in your vegetable garden, or you want to maximize your efficiency or start getting a lot more productivity out of your growing space, then the Seed to Table course that I teach could be a really good solution for you to accelerate your learning curve. And to get a good sample of the way I teach and an introduction to some of the strategies that we're using in our growing spaces, you can check out my free workshop. I'll leave a link to that in the description. See you in the next one.